So, it's been a minute. Hi everybody, it's Jade, and yeah, a lot happened and I didn't make any videos for like 2 months or something like that. So I thought, let's just not dwell on it. There's multiple reasons why I didn't, like, from the second half of August to the first half of September I was in Australia and New Zealand, and I am going to be making a video about everything that happened over there because I don't know, I found it very, very interesting. Definitely like best holiday slash work trip of my life. So there will be a video or a couple of videos coming about that because I took some videos whilst I was there and lots of photos and stuff. But mostly I hit like a major reading slump. So whilst this is going to be a wrap up of, I believe, August and September, I'm fairly certain I did July's wrap up. Fairly certain. But I'm going to double check that. It's been so long, I've like... So it is 2 months worth of wrap ups. However, in that 2 months, let me see how many books I actually read. In that month I read 8 books, which is like nothing to sneer at all, but considering the fact that there have been many points in the months before that where I read 8 books in 1 month or more, I definitely felt like I was hitting a point where I couldn't bring myself to read as much as I normally do. Normally I'm reading every day or every evening, like before I go to bed, which is something I need to get back into because my sleep schedule is better if I read before I go to sleep, because then I'm not looking at a screen or anything like that. But anyway, I think I realised that I was starting to hit a bit of a reading slump because due to all of the reading challenges that I set myself, I knew which books that I was going to read months in advance, which meant that I wasn't allowing myself to read books that I really wanted to as they were coming out. I wasn't allowing myself to mood read at all and stuff like that. So, excuses aside, this is my August and September wrap up. I mean, I did during this time hit my reading goal for the year. I'm now on 55 books out of the 50 that I wanted to read this year, so it's not all bad. In fact, none of it's bad because reading is a hobby and I need to stop being so hard on myself. Anyway, let's get to the reason you're actually here. It's not me trying to, make myself feel better. It's me talking about the books I read. So we'll do that, shall we? Cool. Let's do it. I'm not going to do audiobooks first and then physical books like I normally do because it's been so long, some of them I'm trying to remember which ones were audiobooks and which ones aren't, so I'm just going to talk about them in the order in which I read them. I also don't remember which months I read these in, so we're just going to go. But the first book I read since I last updated you. I'm going to stop with this like self-deprecating stuff and we're just going to talk about the books. So, the first book I read was Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. I gave this a 3-star. I think I finished this at the beginning of August, so I'm now trying to remember my feelings about it. I remember the plot. I remember it only got a 3-star from me because I'm not super into, like, relationship drama, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that is what I mean. As in, I don't tend to read domestic thrillers and stuff like that. This isn't a domestic thriller, but it had some of the tropes of a domestic thriller. Detransition Baby follows 3 people. You've got Reese, who is a trans woman. You have Amez, who is a detransitioned man, used to be a trans woman, but we'll get into that more as well. And you have, what was her name? Katrina, who is a cis lady. And Reese, who is, I feel like, our main POV character. This might be why it bugged me a bit, is that I didn't love any of these characters. They all bugged me in certain ways, which I feel like they were meant to, But there were times where I was like, oh my god, grow up, you're in your, like, 30s. Grow up. Anyway. So, Reese and Amez used to date back when Amez was Amy. And then something awful happened and Amy was hate crimed and then decided, you know what, enough is enough. I can't deal with how hard life is as a trans woman, and detransitioned into Amez. And the reason that I might swap pronouns as I'm talking about Amez is that there is no concrete evidence in this as to what Amez actually identifies as. He now goes with he, him pronouns. However, you have... The only reason he did detransition was because of how hard his life was as a woman. Not that he no longer identifies as a woman. And that in an ideal situation, he probably would continue to be Amy. And, yeah. And Reese gives him an awful lot of shit for it. And I'm like... I get it that you're hurt because you broke up and all of this stuff, but also you have, like, zero compassion for someone going through the shit that they've just gone through. And you also have gone through very similar shit. Just because you've decided they're weak because they can't continue, whereas you're currently continuing, like... I don't know, this was, I guess, a lot of the grow the fuck up emotions I was having. I also realised this is very rich coming from... I was just about to call myself a cis woman. As someone who very much... Wow, yeah, am I just going to come out on video? Like, that's the whole thing. I am a non-binary she, they. So I am very cis-presenting. I don't mind people calling me she, because it's... Like, I get, like... I feel like I relate a little bit more to Amez in that I'm like, it's easier for a lot of people to just not know that I would possibly prefer they pronouns because I don't mind people using she and stuff like that. There are certain people who do know, but they're the people I feel comfortable around saying that to. And yeah, so again, like, I am not like, I am not a trans person. I have not dealt with that shit. I feel like there is some overlap with me being gay, that we're going into this, like, way more than we need to. I've, like, forgotten how to do these videos. Quick and snappy. Anyway, so, let's get back to the actual plot, shall we? Which is that Reese and Amy broke up. Amez believed he was infertile due to, taking estrogen for so long. And so he started having a relationship with his boss, Katrina, which obviously is all kinds of power imbalance messed up, but we won't get into that. And then Katrina falls pregnant, and then there's that whole, well, you told me you were infertile, and now I'm pregnant, like, what the fuck? Like, so there's a lot of, do I keep this baby? Do I even want to keep this baby? Like, do I actually want to be a mum? Because I never really wanted, like, would you be a father? And it's like, it is an entire thing book about gender politics and how messy relationships are at the best of times, and how much messier they are when people don't talk to each other and are hiding things and then just, like, make unilateral decisions for each other because, like, Amez is like, oh no, well, I want you to keep the baby, but I also don't want to be a father because that gives me weird gender squicks. Which, fine. How about you keep the baby, we raise it together, but then we also bring in my ex-girlfriend because I know she wants a kid. Like, I definitely didn't hate it. It was just a mess from start to finish, and I feel like that was what it was trying to be. Like, there's no satisfactory ending, but then that also felt very real for this kind of situation. But I do remember reading a lot of it just being like, I feel like there's an easy way to deal with this, and you guys are making it so much more convoluted and difficult than it needs to be. That was the first book I read anyway. After that, I read Wilder Girls by Rory Powers. I gave this, how many? This was also a 3-star. This concurrent 3-star books may have contributed to my reading slump in that, other than Piranesi and another book I'm going to talk about in here, I haven't necessarily recently read a book that I've gone, oh my god, that's amazing, that's then inspired me to keep reading. I've just had a lot of like middle of the road books. Anyway, this is a young adult dystopian fiction which is like my jam. I absolutely loved it. The reason it didn't score... Why didn't I score it higher? Because I remember really enjoying this and I liked the premise. I feel like maybe it was the writing style just wasn't for me all that much. Maybe I'm just a bit too old for it now, I don't know. But the whole premise of Wild Girls is that it's set in a all-girls school on an island near New York, I think? I'm not sure, I don't know how American geography works. Anyway, but they're on like a little island, and then a year or so ago, a virus disease broke out that's starting to change the girls on there. So the government locked them down and basically stopped them from leaving. And this is the story of a group of girls who are surviving this, and how they're surviving it, and how this is changing their bodies, and how that is like slowly killing people. It's also making some people stronger for a short amount of time before it then like hits them again. So you have girls with like weird growths or like constantly oozing sores that never change. You have certain girls that like hair glows in the dark and stuff like that. And, like, the whole concept is really good, and I feel like the relationships in this are very real, in that you have a mix of, like, this is basically the end of the world for these girls. They don't know if they're ever going to get cured or if they're ever going to leave. So you have that and that stress, and the fact that they're like slowly starving to death because they're getting less and less food and stuff like that, mixed with general teenage girl angst, where you're just like, this is also just very much hormones are getting in the way and they're having stupid bitchy fights with each other that you're like, come on. Like, literally your world is burning down. Priorities, but you're also like 15. But yeah, like, it's exactly what I thought it was going to be going in, pretty much. I think it was that there was some plot twists that I was just a bit like, were a bit predictable. It also left me on a cliffhanger in that I'm not sure if there is a sequel to this. And I'm also not sure if I want to read a sequel to it if there is a sequel. But, I mean, some books are just better by themselves. After that, I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This was one of my buzzword picks. I can't remember which month for, probably for August. I listened to this as an audiobook. I gave it 3 stars. That might reduce the more I've stewed on it, because I get what people say when they say that this is just a self-help book disguised as a fantasy. Because all I got from it was self-help. In a way that it was like... but really surface level, I guess, is what I'm saying, in that the characters were having these revelations. I was like, am I just a bit more have I focused more on mental health than most people, because that's not a revelation to me, that's really fucking obvious. But the whole concept of Midnight Library is that when you die, you get taken to the Midnight Library and you have the option of going through all of your past life, all of your alternate possible lives, to potentially find one that is more satisfying. You have the main character whose name I cannot currently remember. I think it was like Amy or something. No, Nora. Completely different name. Wow. You have the main character Nora, who... This is another thing, I guess, is that... I know that we're supposed to feel sorry for Nora, but a lot of the time I was like... like, maybe it was a lack of empathy, I'm not sure, or the way it was written. I was just, again, a bit like, oh my god, get over yourself. Like, the reason you are in this rut right now is kind of... There are external factors, fully accept that, but also, you're not helping yourself. You are really not. And, I mean, that is one of the revelations she comes to, which I'm happy about. It wasn't sort of like, oh yes, life just sucks and all that stuff. And this is not me downplaying depression It is a genuine, real thing, and it's not something that people can just, like, think their way out of. Like, fully understand that. But there were, it took an awful lot of alternate lives for her to come to certain realizations that I was like, come on now. Yeah, well, I feel like all I'm doing is talking shit about these books. I didn't hate any of them. I'm just, it might be that it was so long ago that I read them that now all I can remember are the things that stuck in my head, and the things that stuck in my head were the negatives. But yeah, I feel like that is actually going to be reduced to a 2-star now that I thought about it. Going on to the first thing that is above a 3-star on this list, I read Eon, The Last Dragon Eye? No, Rise of the Dragon Eye, by Alison Goodman. This is one of those books that's been on my shelf for ages. This is part of a duology, so in my Pop Sugar Challenge, one of the extra prompts was read 2 parts of a duology. I'm currently reading the second one, which is like double the size of this. This was a 4-star. This is, I feel I was like, this is good old fantasy. This is back into my comfort zone that I was in as a child. Yes. So Eon is set in a world that is very much inspired by, like, Imperial China. Definitely. And you have the 12 dragons that are, their power helps to maintain balance in the world. And their power is channeled through Dragon Eyes, who are chosen from a group of 12 boys every year to replace one of the old Dragon Eyes in a circle, which is the same as the Chinese zodiac. So you have, like, the rat dragon, the tiger dragon, the ox dragon, and stuff like that. Eon is one of the candidates for this current ascending Dragon Eye, which is going to be the rat dragon. So he is competing against these 11 other boys to be chosen, and if he is chosen, he will bond with the rat dragon and then be able to channel his power. However, there's, like, a lot of things going on. One, Dragon Eyes historically have only been boys because in this universe, women are very much nothing. And the fact that Eon is actually not a boy is obviously a big secret that he's trying to hide. That's not a spoiler. Like, you find out that Eon, because you're reading it from Eon's perspective. You know he's not a boy right from the off, and it's not a trans thing in that he actually feels as a boy. I keep using the term he because Eon does very much identify as a girl. She's just hiding as a boy. There are bits in this where she finds certain things more comfortable, such as acting like a man and stuff like that. But that definitely reads more of a, because that gives her actual freedom and, like, independence and the ability for people to take her seriously, as opposed to because she actually feels like a man. And yeah, so there's, like, a whole, I don't want to get more into it to, like, spoil anything, but there's really good world building in this, and you have a lot of, like, court drama, because the Dragon Eyes are all housed in the Emperor's, like, compound and everything like that, so there's the whole, not only does she have to hide the fact that she's a boy, she also has to, like, learn how to not get caught out just in regular court, like, backstabbing type things and stuff like that, and then there's a whole, like, plot going on with the current, like, Rat Dragon Eye and all that stuff. I very much enjoyed this, and I'm currently reading the second one, which is Iona. And I'm about quarter of the way through, I think. After that, I read The Time Machine by H.G.Wells. This was my book that you can read in one sitting. As you can tell, I think it's barely 100 pages long, even though these are, like, Bible pages. 102 pages long. This is also one of my classics. This, I have watched both movie adaptations of The Time Machine. I think there's only 2. I've watched the black and white version and then the more modern version. It wasn't black and white. It was early colour. I preferred that one to the newer one. Anyway, so and the movies followed this very closely, considering how small this book is. The Time Machine basically follows the story of an inventor who is only called the Time Traveller in this, as he explains that he has invented a time machine to his like group of like smoking buddies who come around, who are named like things like the Doctor, the Banker. So no one seems to have a name in this really, and he's trying to convince him. He's like, no, I made a time machine. I can show it to you. This is what happened when I went forward in time. And the story of like the advancement of mankind and then the eventual fall of it, and the splitting of humankind into two separate species. Because during the time when this was written, you can definitely, like, I was expecting a lot more eugenicsy kind of feelings in this, but it was actually a good stance on how the upper class rely on the lower class, and if they don't, not lower class, the working class, which, I mean, yeah, but in this specific context you have the upper aristocracy and you have the working class, and how without the working class the aristocracy would be very much left to rot, almost. And the split is that you had the, like, well, not goodies, just like the weaker, softer race of people that have never known a hard day's work in their life, who just, eat fruit and play about and stuff like that, and have become like very infantilized and very much like children, who are then now preyed upon by the descendants of the working class that were like stuck in the factories and have morphed into these night-dwelling creatures that rely on machinery but then also eat the rich. Yeah, very, very good. And considering when it was written as well, like, I always feel like this with old sci-fi when you read it and you're like, either they predicted this, or not necessarily, they were looking at the advancements of technology and making logical leaps, or people read these and then tried to make, or were inspired by the inventions that were in old sci-fi. Speaking of science fiction, and going back to one of my favourite authors, also 5-star read, I knew it was going to be anyway, but this is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the second in the Monk and Robot series, so instead of like writing, I don't know if you can consider spoilers in a Becky Chambers, because they're all about, I feel every Becky Chambers book I've ever read has been about emotion and the human condition, as opposed to, like, brilliant world building, but the world building exists to study the human condition, and Monk and Robot specifically has been about purpose and finding yourself and realising that just because you don't have one singular purpose, that's not a bad thing. People aren't born, they're not tools, they're not born with a specific thing that they have to do. So if you feel a little bit lost in your life, that's fine. You can do something different. You don't have to have a purpose every second of the time. And then this one specifically, because the previous book was very much if you don't have a purpose in life, that's not the end of the world, because you're not born with one. This one was very much more about, you have worth even if you have not contributed, or you have not considered yourself as having contributed every second of your life. Like, your worth is not tied to your productivity. You still deserve love and kindness and food and rest, even if all you've done today is get up and out of bed. Or even if you haven't managed to do that, if all you've done is laid in bed and languished, you still deserve kindness and love and support. And, like, I feel like I tear up every time I talk about Becky Chambers, because her books just give me such a warm feeling inside, and I'm like, oh. This is what needs to get me out of the reading slump. I have another Becky Chambers on my to-be-read shelf. I might just skip over the ones that were in front of it and just read that. Okay, 2 books to go. And on the other end of the spectrum, still high rated, but on a it didn't give me, didn't necessarily give me faith in humanity the way that Becky Chambers' books does. It gave me very much the, oh my god, our society sucks feelings. I read This Is Going to Hurt, Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. This was the book club book pick for my book club. Could I have said that any more reductively? I gave this a 4-star. The only reason I didn't give it a 5-star was because of how angry it made me. Which made me, like, art is supposed to invoke emotions, even if those emotions are negative. Yeah. Oh my god. Like, this is a memoir, by Adam Kay, who was a junior doctor in the NHS, for how many years? It was like almost 10 years. And he does clarify, junior doctor in the NHS in England just means you're not right at the top. You can be a junior doctor and have been in doctoring for like 10 plus years. You slowly go up the ranks and everything like that. And while some of the stories, because Adam Kay was a gynecologist and obstetrics doctor, so he focused mostly in births and prenatal care and all of that stuff, but also looking after women who are having history, basically anything to do with the uterus and the womb and stuff like that was his like remit. So whilst there was some like hilarious stories about different like birthing stories that people had, also when he was like seconded to work in like A&E and stuff, like things that people had stuck up their ass and stuff like that. And he reads, because he read the audiobook, Adam Kay, his sardonic humour, very British like sarcasm, was just right through all of this and was hilarious. And yet there's obviously this very much underlying thing of the main reason he published his diaries was because at the time that it was being published, our government was, have been treating the NHS like shit for years and defunding it, and then saying anytime a junior doctor is like, we should be paid more because we're working like 80 to 100 hour weeks with like no overtime and no sleep, and we barely see our families, and we get no guaranteed time off or anything like that. And then they're told by the government, you're just being greedy. The only reason you're doing this is because you just want more money, despite the fact that they're like, we are working our asses off for basically free because we want to help people, and you're telling us that we shouldn't be like given a living wage for that. Like, how dare you? And that is very much the undercurrent of this book, is how much he did love what he was doing and he loved helping people, but at the same time how his social life was just disintegrating, how he was losing friends and partners and sleep and having like close to a nervous breakdown and stuff like this, because he's just working constantly and he's exhausted and he has no time for himself. All he's doing is trying to put out fires, because the NHS is chronically understaffed, because if you're not going to look after the people who work there and who are saving lives, of course you're going to be understaffed. And if you can't tell, I have a little bit of a cold. And through most of it, there was still a hope of, he's like complaining, but then he's also being like, if people asked me if I would do anything else, I'd say no, this is the best job in the world. And then something happens right at the end that broke him and broke my heart. And I listened to audiobooks on the drive to work, and this happened like as I was driving the car, and I was like, don't cry, this is awful. Oh my god, what a note to end it on. Oh my god. That is a book I would highly recommend. Highly recommend. The last book I have finished in September, I read this one on holiday. This was the other book club book, which I feel is proof of all of the books before this were before the reading slump hit. And the fact that the next book I read, they were book club picks back to back, and we have months between our book club picks most of the time. And that I hadn't filled that space with anything else, any other reading, I feel is quite telling, for me, personally, anyway. But I did read this as a physical copy, but I then left it in Australia, or was it New Zealand? I left it in New Zealand. Not that that's important, because I just didn't want to put it back in my suitcase. And it was The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filya. I almost didn't leave it purely because the cover is gorgeous. But then I was also like, come on, you are running out of space in your suitcase. Are you going to read this again? And the answer was no. Probably not. I gave it a 3-star. I really did enjoy it. It was a series of short stories, all very focused on different stories of black women who were their relationships between God and their own personal lives. And yeah, it was each one was really beautiful in its own way. I liked certain ones more than I liked others. Like there was one, I think it was titled Peach Cobbler or something, which has just stuck with me. There were other ones that I just didn't care for as much. The one that I really loved was a story about, it's written as a letter to an unknown sister who, you have a group of, I think, 4 sisters who all have different mothers, but the same father, and their father has just died. And then they find out that they had a 5th sister that they didn't know about, and so one of them takes it upon herself to be like, well, I'm going to write her a letter to tell her that our shared father has died, and that we would very much like to know her, because the only good thing our father did in our lives is, in our opinion, make us and let us know each other. So we want to bring her in. Like, their father was a piece of shit. But they have a relationship because of him. And it was very good in that you had these conflicting feelings between all of these sisters who viewed their fathers in slightly different ways. You had certain sisters who had already, like, they were like, no, he's a piece of shit. Like, yes, I'm sad that he's gone because he's still our dad, but he never did anything for us, he never supported us, he was never there for anything. And then you have other sisters who are still holding on to that. They were like, well, yes, but he's our father, and like, throughout their life, even though he constantly let them down, is still waiting for him to, you know, appear at their piano recital, even though he never had before. But it didn't matter how many times he let her down, she was still gonna wait for him. And it was like the heartbreak of that mixed with this really sassy humour. It was it was a lovely series of short stories, I have to say. It was just yeah, I'm trying to be more ruthless with keeping books on my shelf and being like, I'm only going to keep them if I know or get the feeling that I'm going to read them again. Because shelf space is limited. That was my weirdly ranty wrap-up of the past 2 months. Yeah, I feel like that was a lot more negative than it necessarily needed to be, because I didn't hate any of the books on this list. I loved some of them. But again, I read them so long ago now that I'm trying to remember the good things about them. But anyway, yeah, I am trying to get back into reading again. I'm also, I think, the pressure I was putting on myself to get a video out every single week was starting to, like, ruin my enjoyment of reading. So I'm, I think, going to try and diversify the subjects of the videos that I make. I have other things that I want to make videos about that I'm passionate about. And I'm also going to be less strict about an upload schedule, because, like, it's not like this is my job. This is something I do for fun. If it's not fun, why am I doing it? But anyway, if you enjoyed this slightly unhinged video, I feel like it was very, very all over the place, please consider giving it a like and maybe comment about what your favourite bit was. Have you read any of those books that I read? Did you agree with my opinions? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Maybe subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!